Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to share with you my 3 cards 1 stamp set collaboration challenge with my friend Sintang Mayumi. This time we are using Hero Art's Out of This World Christmas set, and I must say this is one of my favorite holiday sets because Santa Claus and Rudolph really stole my heart. I will be making 3 interactive cards, so let's dive in. I already pre-colored the images that I will be using for the 3 cards. For my first card, I have a dark blue cardstock panel and the Black Suit Distress Oxide ink, and using my blending brush, I will ink up the edges of the panel to imitate a dark outer space background. I will be using the moon and the star images from the stamp set. Here I am just trying to figure out where to place my colored images on my panel. For the moon and the star images, I will stamp these on my blended background with Versamark ink since I want to emboss these images with white embossing powder. I already prepped my panel with my anti-static powder buddy to prevent any stray powder where I don't want them to be. I am using white embossing powder from Zing, and I will use a dry brush to remove the excess powder from the panel. And then I will use my Wagner heat tool until the powder is melted and shiny. And I will add a couple more stars on this panel using the same process, using my Versamark ink, white embossing powder, and my Wagner heat tool. And I will use Copic Opaque White to add white splatter to create little stars on my background. I'm adding a little bit of water and then just splatter it all over the panel and creating some small dots as well. And once it's dry, I can now adhere all my images on my panel. I have this red cardstock that I want to use for my sentiment, but I want it as the same color as my Santa Claus, so I am using the Copic. I use the Copic marker to darken that red cardstock, and now I'm ready to stamp my sentiment using Versamark ink and the same embossing powder, and then I heat it up with my heat tool until it's shiny and melted. And then I'm using this Elizabeth Craft Designs banner die to cut into a strip. Then I'll be using these mini wobblers from the Reese to adhere my images. The planet Earth I will adhere directly on my panel, but Santa and the reindeer I will be using the mini wobblers. And here I'm just gonna attach the mini wobblers to the reindeer and Santa Claus. I will be using my Gina Marie Designs Stitch Rectangle die to trim my panel because I want to have a mat around the panel. I will be using a white A2 size card base, but I will put a fun foam behind my blended panel to create dimension. I'll be using a top folding A2 size card base. And then now I'm removing the release paper from the back of my images so I can attach them on my blended panel. And for my sentiment strip, at first I wanted to adhere this directly on my panel, but later on I added double-sided foam tape to create dimension. And for the inside of my card, I will just stamp a sentiment that says Merry Christmas, and I'll be using my VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, and this card is finished. I love how Santa and Rudolph wobbles and dances on this card. For card number 2, I am stamping the Santa image with Tuxedo Black Memento ink because I will be using my Copic markers. The colors I will be using are shown across the screen. I wanted a different color Santa suit this time, so I'm using my BGs, and then for the gifts I will be using some pinks. And I fussy cut this image. I have this 6x6 Recollections Christmas paper pad, and I chose the starry background, and then I'll use this paper rose snow globe dies to create a shaker card. I will color the snow globe stand with Copic markers as well, using the W's this time. For my snow globe background, I will add more of the star images using Versamark ink and my white embossing powder, and I will be stamping them on the pink background. I will use white embossing powder again and hit this with a heat tool until it's melted and shiny. I will adhere my Santa image and the pink gifts directly on the pink panel using glitter glue. I die cut the circle border 5 times on a white cardstock and stack them on top of each other to create dimension. And then I will also adhere a pattern circle border on an acetate, so I can use this for my shaker bits later on. And to create a well for my shaker bits, I will add more dimension to this circle border using a very thin foam tape from the Reese. Then I will use my powder tool to remove some of the stickiness around the foam tape and on my panel so the shaker elements can move freely. I will add some pink sequins and some iridescent tiny snowflakes directly on my panel. Now I'm ready to adhere this pink panel on a slightly larger white round panel to create my snow globe. I will use my Spectrum Noir Glimmer pen to add shimmer to my images and use my anti-static powder bag to remove stickiness from the images. For my sentiment, I will stamp the sentiment that says, "Wishing you a holiday cheer" on a white cardstock, and I will use a clear embossing powder for this one. I cut it into a tiny strip and I will add this on my snow globe stand. And now I'm ready to put some sequins inside my snow globe. I use a lot of sequins for this one. I use the pink and the iridescent sequins and snowflakes. And now I'm ready to adhere the acetate part of the shaker on top of the panel. I will pop up the snow globe stand with foam tape to add dimension. I will attach this snow globe on a pattern paper from Recollections, the 6x6 Christmas pattern paper, and I trimmed this down to 5x5. I'm using glitter glue to attach this on the stripe panel. And then I have the steel cardstock from Recollections. I trimmed this down to 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 to create a top folding card base. I will attach this on my card base using a dry adhesive. And then for the inside of my card, I will use a Greeting Farm stamp set, and I will just ink this up, and I use VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink. It says Merry Christmas Wishes, and I'll attach this inside my card. And my card number 2 is finished. I love how this card turned out. I'm a shaker card girl, so this one is my favorite. For card number 3, I will use a dark red cardstock, a pattern paper from a 6x6 Christmas paper pad from Recollections, this penny slider die set from Technique Tuesday, and Gina Marie Design Stitch Rectangle die set. I will trim the pattern paper slightly smaller than A2 size using my Tim Holtz trimmer. And then I will also use the circle slider die for my pattern paper. Before I remove the die from my pattern paper, I will attach the circle part of the slider to my dark red background panel. And I'm using those tiny dies to create the penny slider mechanism. So I'm attaching 2 of that penny slider mechanism on top of each other. I will add dimension on this pattern paper using foam tape so as the slider mechanism will move freely. Now I will adhere the tiny dot stack that I made earlier to create my slider mechanism. You can also use a tiny dot foam tape for this. I also need to pop up the middle circle panel using foam tape to create a canal for my slider mechanism. So now I'm putting foam tape in the circle, on that circle panel, and then this one I'm removing the release paper and then attach it on my panel. And this time I'm using my anti-static powder tool to remove some stickiness around that slider. And then now I'm ready to put the middle circle panel to trap that slider, the penny slider mechanism. Now I'm just showing you that it will go around. And then here I'm just attaching the Santa Claus image. I am using Spectrum Noir shimmer pen to add shine and shimmer on my Santa Claus image. And here I'm just showing you how Santa glides and rotates freely when shaken. For my sentiment, I will use Gina K Designs stamp set, and this is called Scripty Holiday. I will stamp Season's Greetings on a red cardstock using Versamark ink, and I will white heat emboss this again using my Zing white embossing powder and my heat tool. And then I will use a banner die from Elizabeth Craft Designs to cut this into a strip and attach it on my panel. I will use ATG gun to attach this directly on my front panel. And for my card base, I will use the same Recollections 110-pound red cardstock from Michaels. And this is an A2 size side folding card base, and I will attach my finished panel directly on my card base. For the inside of my card, I am using a white cardstock, and I'm using a VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink again to stamp a sentiment that says Merry Christmas. I'm using the same stamp set from Gina K Designs, and then I'll attach this white panel inside of my card. And for final touch, I will just add some iridescent tiny snowflakes on the sentiment area and the front panel. And that finishes off my card. This is my card number 3. I also love how this card turned out. So much fun playing with this and watching Santa glides around the card. So here are the close-up photos of the 3 cards I made using this out of this world Christmas stamp set from Hero Arts. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I love making interactive cards, and I had so much fun with this stamp set. Hope you stop by Sintang Mayumi's channel and check out the cards she made with this stamp set. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!